Okay, start. Well, good morning, and this is pretty. I always like this part of the process because it's pretty fun to share with you what I was able to do since last night. So, typically, this meeting happens later on in the day. Um, so, a couple things that I normally might have gotten to that I didn't, but I think you'll be pleased with where we are. I think one of the first things that I always like to do is recap a little bit about the community and what we heard. Um, from a big picture perspective, I think that people know about the values and attributes that the community has, but they're also scared to be pigeonholed into being one dimensional, if that makes sense. I shared with a lot of you the comment where I had somebody who came up to me on Tuesday night or no, Monday night at the theater and said, no matter what you do, it's got to have a picture of the river and a fly fisherman. And then I had somebody else come up to me and say, please don't make us only about the river. And I, from a person who works with communities and brands communities, I understand what those two comments mean. There's something that you're known for and you're proud of being known for it, but you also want people to dig deeper. And I really kind of took that with us, the royal us, during this process. So hopefully you'll see both sides of that come out with the recommendations that we make. A little bit about the overall process. One of the big things that I really believe is important on a community brand level is having the appropriate components to be able to tell your story. So where we typically talk about this from is this idea of defining a color palette, having typefaces, a consistent and repeatable message, and then a general approach to graphics that allows you the ability to connect those dots. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to start off with the color palette. I looked at the local high school. I realized that it is green, but green in this neck of the woods is pretty ubiquitous. I wanted to create a color palette that allowed us to have some vibrancy while still staying in that spectrum between trees, water, and energy. Was kind of that was my little mantra. You have trees and you love the trees, and you have water and you love the water, and the energy of the people is what's making the community special. So I identified 5 different colors. They're a little bit different on screen, but that's actually pretty good. I did 3 different tones of blue, and then I did kind of a gold and a green. And you'll see where those come in and get repeated over and over again. And then from there, I wanted to look at typefaces. Now, what I did not do is I did not create a slide of all of the different ways that Grayling appeared today in the community. But I have great photos that I will be able to share on the next visit on how literally every time you see the name Grayling, it's different. When you come to the gateway sign, as you get off the highway, you see one appearance. If you decide to stop at Walgreens and visit the lovely Visitors Gazebo, with information that has not been updated since 2008. If anybody wants to take a note of that, that was kind of interesting. Literally, the papers in the glass case are dated 2008.
That was before Walgreens was even there.
It probably was, yeah. In there, you see 2 different identities. You see the old, I'm going to guess it was an old logo that the chamber used that simply was the word Grayling with a fish. But then also you do see the newer chamber logo, which is interesting because I didn't realize it was that old. And then in addition, you also see the Grayling Bicycle Turnpike logo. So you've got a couple things going there. Continue on into the community. The new parking signs that you all have put up have a different logo on them. So you can see there it lacks that consistency. One of the ways that you start to introduce the consistency is by defining typefaces Typically, I will go through and I'll do 2, maybe 3. Here I did 4, and I think you'll see where those kind of come out. The primary typeface is a sans serif typeface. It is, sans serif means it doesn't have doohickeys on it. That's the technical term for that. I selected that because sans serif typefaces by nature are designed to be content neutral. A lot of times when a community goes through and tries to create a logo for themselves, the first thing they come to realize is their community is beautiful. So they decide to pick a pretty scripty typeface. You want legibility and connectivity to be your goals of those typefaces. So I selected that sans serif as your primary. If you get in and kind of look at it, it has some really nice features to it. The corners are rounded instead of hard and crisp. It gives a nice feel, and it's actually a typeface that was derived from kind of the heyday of the timber industry. So it connects back into one of the stories that we want to tell. The secondary typeface is what we call a slab serif. So it has the doohickeys, but the doohickeys are kind of rectangles instead of having any kind of curvature to them. Slab serifs, again, they do this interesting role of being both contemporary and traditional at the same time. So it allows you this opportunity to use that to connect the dots.
Still easy to read.
It is still easy to read. Now, then for the next 2, I selected one that I'm calling your tagline typeface, which is obviously a very ornate script. This is used extremely selectively in things that don't need to be particularly legible. Now, this is a graphic tactic that I always like to share with folks. Sometimes things are designed to be difficult to read because then it makes you pause and makes you dig in a little bit deeper. It's kind of the same reason why sometimes downtowns have parallel parking spaces, because they want it to be harder for you to park there, and therefore you have motivation to do something else. Same thing with typeface like that. So do not judge it on its legibility. It's intended to be a little bit difficult, but it's intended to be presented in a way that it's easy to kind of draw people into a different level of detail. And then finally, the third is the position typeface, and I'm using this as part of the downtown position statement. It's a handwritten typeface, and it just gives you this opportunity to put a human element on top of everything else. So from there, the next thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to create a word type. And what a word type is a word type is a standardized treatment for the name Grayling. And then that way, whenever Grayling is used, you have a consistent way to do it. Because what ends up happening is cities, organizations, groups, events, they always sit there and they go immediately to what the graphics are going to look like. And then the typeface selection is like secondary. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any difference to anybody. So what I did was I created a custom version of your word type. We started with that typeface, and I did a tremendous amount of customization on this. Doesn't really look like it, but it's just things that allow it to be yours. The G has its own signature diagonal cut on it. The diagonal cut mimics the diagonal cut in the A. Of course, we have the long swooping R with the accent kind of connecting into the river. What we're able to do is we're able to have something that's extremely legible that references the river simply by the word all by itself. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've looked at colors, we've looked at typefaces, we've seen the evolution of the word type, and then the next thing I always like to hit on is some of the brand values, the things that kind of contribute into what we're looking for. Heard a lot of people talk about small town. You want to maintain that small town feel. The river is of huge importance. Canoeing is a big draw, especially with the marathon. Fly fishing. Fly fishing is an interesting activity that helps to expose Grayling to a more affluent visitor. So therefore, I'm going to use this the right way, an ego boost for a community, if that makes sense. Um, when you have a community like Grayling, it's kind of like owning a classic car. If you ever know anybody that owns a classic car, it takes constant effort and constant investment to keep that car looking good. And that's why people with classic cars take them to cruise-ins, because they need everybody else to tell them how beautiful their car is. We want to cultivate those opportunities for us to get the external feedback to help drive the ongoing motivation to continue to invest and be stewards of our communities. Heard a lot about breweries. The breweries are both an indicator to the outside that you have a cool factor, and then they also lead a segue into this whole idea of makers and artisans. And there was a lot of conversation this week about art, artisans, and makers. And those words are very connected, but they're also preconceived notions that I think you as a community should be mindful of. I do not believe that Grayling, Michigan is an art town. I do think it is an artisan town. And I think that that distinction is an important distinction to make, because it is the distinction between elite and approachable. So as long as we maintain a conversation of approachable arts, and even your finest galleries in the community are extremely approachable, but you're not a artist colony. You're a community that is connected to its land, and the byproduct of that connection is a focus on arts. Does that make sense? Does that?
And a lot of natural art.
Exactly, exactly. So I want to be really, really mindful of that, because I think a lot of times people get lazy about how they refer to things, and they just say the arts, the arts, the arts. And when you say the arts, you automatically start to leave certain populations behind. And when you're a community with a median household income of just over 28,000, you need to make sure that every effort that you're cultivating is one that is approachable and welcoming. So I think I wanted to do something that made reference to this kind of cool vibe, but not like, oh, we're an arts community, because nobody, that's not what we're here.
With high-end, you know,
Right.
high-end,
Yeah. So the idea, and then finally the old growth pines, I think just kind of all around, there are a lot of things that you heard over and over again. I do want to say that as we started to get into the dynamics of what made the community unique, okay? Now, I want to, again, this is where it gets scary, because it's like, your community has certain attributes that make it pop up and pop out from the communities that surround it. A lot of your attributes are actually similar to attributes of communities in your region, because the geographies are similar, so some of the things you have are going to be similar. So even though certain things might really pop out if I live in Delaware, then they might not be all that different from the communities around us. But your connection with the canoe marathon, that connection to the canoe marathon actually makes much bigger impacts to a person who drives into the community. I have to tell you, one of the most impactful things that I came across on my first drive into town was the wooden sign right next to Burger King that says, I think it says canoe trips, and then it has 3 different canoe outfitters going down a side street, like going down a place that that's not even downtown. That just really left me with this idea that this community is a cool community, and by connecting with the community, I can feel outdoorsy. Giving someone who is not outdoorsy the ability to feel outdoorsy is tremendously popular right now in our society.
It's a boat that I live in.
Uh-huh.
I don't camp, guys. But
Right.
I really appreciate
What-
being here where I can pretend to camp.
Exactly. So the thing that is, I mean, that's why we're seeing department store sales declining and stores sales at stores like REI going up and up and up. That's why we're seeing companies that have been around for decades and decades, like Patagonia, seeing these huge booms in sales because people are buying things that make them feel cool.
Even though they've never been in a canoe.
Exactly. And we can get irritated by the posers of the world, or we can take their money and we can use them to drive our vision. So what I wanted to do, and actually I went outside the scope of this visit, and I started with the community as a whole. And then I drilled down to the city, then I drilled down to downtown, and then I drilled down to Main Street. So I'm going to show all you this stuff, and it's top secret. So got to be quiet. But so the first thing that I did was on the community level, and really think about this as being the tool that Grayling Visitors Bureau would use. I wanted to do a stylized G that brought in a lot of those elements and ties it in with that word type. So this is what I came up with. So you actually see, like, one of the funny things about a grayling fish is that back fin and how kind of funny shaped it is. What you're doing is you're getting this G. It's giving you the opportunity to have that represent grayling. You're able to hit on the outdoor feel, hit on the river, hit on the presence of canoes, hit on the origin of your name, and then introducing this tagline of naturally colorful. Now, we want to use that tagline as an opportunity to start talking about our people and our events. I have to tell you, some of the stuff that this Main Street organization does are some of the coolest events that I've come across in 15 years. And I want you to be able to use those to drive your momentum forward. So we have this overall kind of community and visitor-oriented identity. And then from there, we wanted to take the same premise and roll it over into the city brand. Now, if you're familiar with the city logo now, it's often described as the duck because it kind of looks a little quacky. So what I wanted to do was I simply wanted to do a simple redesign that keeps it in the exact same realm. Because again, the city is a governmental entity providing services. The city logo no longer has to try to tell this holistic story of the community, but instead simply represent those services. So what I did with them was I simply created a simple stylized version. We've got the canoer. We've got kind of the reference to Hartwick, right? Hartwick Pines in the back. Just having that kind of overall, very simple, very stylized, but this makes it easy for us to start to see the difference between when a city logo's on something versus when we're promoting the community. And it's still using the word type, but it's also has its own look and feel. Simplified down the colors, remove the green, and simply by removing that green, it narrows down that color field and it feels a little more institutional. Does that make sense? Okay, so then...
I talked to someone yesterday, it was Monday afternoon when we were coming in for the first meeting, and someone specifically said to me, it would be really cool if we kept the canoe, but made it just a person and not an Indian in it.
Right, cool. Well, good, we heard them. So then from there, once you start to, and I think what you'll see is as we move in, once we have these tools on the community level, we can be a little bit cooler and a little bit more progressive and confident on the downtown level. So with the downtown brand, I'm simply showing something that looks like this. And we're introducing a downtown tagline. Michigan's most colorful river town. Yep, Michigan's most colorful river town. So now What this does is this sets up the opportunity for every person in the community to know what role you play. And it's a very important concept when you position yourself as a river town, because you're now giving a reason for people who are coming to the region to immerse themselves into the outdoors. You're making that connection. Why, while you are in the outdoors, you owe it to yourself to see Michigan's most colorful river town. So you start to create a value proposition to the folks who are coming up and investing in the region. Again, with this, you see that word type, you see a very stylized version of this overall look and feel. You can see, I created a very simple variant where we just got the G and the canoe. You can just do really fun things. Now, it doesn't always have to be a paddle. When you roll this out and enter this the way that we're suggesting, it can start to roll out into other simple silhouetted images. If you want to do a snowshoe, if you want to do, whatever comes to mind. But being able to have this kind of design confidence.
Well, we could also put it
Yep, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So now, okay, so we've hit destination brand on a community level, destination brand on a downtown level, organization brand on a city level, but we need an organization brand on a Main Street level. And on the Main Street level, I wanted something that was clean, professional, and seemed to represent energy. But I also am a big fan. I feel like when you are a Main Street organization, you are connected to a national network. You're connected to a tried and true process to help communities revitalize. So I like your logo to help you tell that 4-point story. So what I did was I created a logo that's actually inspired by the tip of the paddle. It creates this kind of horizon, this sunburst of sorts. But then what you start to have is you start to have the ability to use the different colors to represent your 4 different committees. Now, again, because you have a downtown logo, remember what your organization logo does. Your organization logo tells people who put something on. It creates institutional credibility so people volunteer their time or give of their resources. But it also just creates a very confident personality so that you can operate in that realm of economic development, not just event programming. Does that make sense? Okay, so then from there, it starts to sing when you start to see it implemented in my mind. So the first thing that I did was I looked at how it would look on business cards. We talked a little bit about the idea of these courtesy cards. So I put one of those together, right, seeing, what a card might look like. And again, what we're doing here is we're introducing that tagline for downtown on the back, just having your, again, very clean, very confident.
Are you missing a word or something?
Probably. Yeah, we just wanted to let you know we stopped by. Yeah. It was late. I did that at about 2. So, yeah, sorry about that. Being able to take the overall design approach and apply it to things like annual reports. So again, remember, professionalism is the key. Being able to highlight that credibility. I designed this PowerPoint template, cover slide, and content slide. So you can,
really like that.
it's easy to use, it's easy to work through.
With the wash and.
Yeah. And then what I did with websites like this, it's a good website. It's got the content where it needs it. So what I always like to do with this is I like to do what I call a 1-hour refresh. Change the background graphic, change the main graphic, change some of the typeface and some of the color backgrounds. So we can go from this to this. And what you can't actually see because it's dark on the screen, but I created a background graphic that's actually the texture of the detail around the entryway to the Masonic Lodge. So it's got this really cool kind of texture that comes from your downtown in the deep rich blue. But again, very simple. Like you could make this change very easily. And that's the whole intent of being able to do that. Next thing, I always like to throw out these just kind of crazy different ideas of how do we give opportunities for people to connect the dots. So we talk a lot about extended hours. Sometimes just having open signs. So people actually know when they're open, you know? I mean, that's one of the big things. So
Stacy can remember to turn hers off too. Stacy's is sometimes open at midnight.
wouldn't it be great to have it where you could text it on and off? I mean, we should come up with that, I think. Well, I will say when we owned our downtown retail establishment, we had a sign that said that we opened at 10-ish, and like everything, all the open times were ishes. All the close times were for.
Definitely locking the door at 5:01.
Yeah. No, we were open till 7, so I'll give ourselves a little credit. But okay, so you started to see. You've seen community. You've seen city. You've seen downtown. You've seen Main Street. Then you've seen some of the implementation into the support materials for the organization. To me, where an overall community brand really gets exciting is when it starts to make its way into the other communications and the events in the community. So the first thing that I'm going to show is not actually an event, but it's more starting to introduce the idea of some uniform hashtags. Now, Ray, you sent out an email last night to the group about this meeting. And at the end of your email, it just said one canoe. And I don't know the backstory, but like as soon as I saw it, I fell in love with it.
So it's the grip logo when they first started. So grip was Grayling. What was grip?
Grip. It was Grayling, wait a minute, grip. Grayling Restoration Improvement Program.
So that's
No,
grip is
revitalization.
So grip is the organization that kind of
Proceeded.
put the pieces together to get Main Street here.
Gotcha.
And their tagline was one canoe, many paddles.
Mm.
For us to all get in the same canoe, go the same direction.
I absolutely adore it, and like when I saw it, I was so like, you know, I
love that, the hashtag.
So this is kind of awesome.
so
I sort of like the
Rock the
tic-tac-toe.
boat.
yeah. So with these, I always like to take a little bit of time to talk about hashtags because I want to be realistic because I think sometimes people, they're either overly optimistic or they don't even really understand them. You know, if you go back to the origin of a hashtag is a content aggregator. It is intended for everybody who self-assigns a hashtag to then allow others to be able to aggregate data of all the content that uses the same tag. So in theory, if I'm on Instagram or if I'm on Facebook and you see a hashtag that says, you know, one canoe, anybody that has ever put one canoe as part of their post, you're able to see it all in one.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think that I don't think that the tail end of the hashtag purpose is used anywhere near as much as the front end where it simply gives you the opportunity to feel connected to a movement. You know, so being able to introduce something that's yours and then have it where it works and people are using it. We have one in our community. I live in Milford, Delaware, and it's just, we are Delaware. I mean, we are Milford. And it's funny because all these people have started putting we are Milford, and now people who are slightly irritated by the enthusiasm of, like, refer to them as the We Are Milford crowd, you know, and so you got to be careful with, but I think you get where I'm going here. Using your colors, using your typefaces, introducing uniform hashtags so that you can grow local pride.
And we do have in the communication strategy when it comes to social media, we do have some other uses in other, not necessarily front end use, but research use where the hashtag is going to be very important. So I
Good, good,
Curious
good,
to
good.
sample and see how they take off and see, and encourage people to really use them.
Cool.
Hashtag.
Hashtag, yeah. Okay, so from there,
The word hashtag
Let's-
is kind of annoying.
it is. I know, it is. Okay, so from there, what I wanted to do was I wanted to start showing you how, again, with the typefaces, the colors, and an overall approach to graphics, you're still allowed the freedom to come up with things that are different. And, you know, you've got Harvest Fest that might look like this, where Christmas Walk might look like this. And you can make a snowflake out of paddles. Because that is awesome. You know? Again, just giving people that opportunity. And what you're starting to do is,
How did we not think of using paddles for a snowflake before?
right, it's simple. It's simple. Okay, so this next one is still kind of processing in my mind, but we talked about Girls' Night Out. And I talked with the board about this idea of maybe you want to think of Girls' Night Out as a precursor to an ongoing extended hours campaign. So what I came up with, and I'm really throwing it out there, food for thought, is the idea of if we back it out and we think about colorful nights out. And then what you end up doing is, what if you started to use a color theme? And you started to have different nights out all throughout the year, and those different nights out had color themes. So in March, it might be green for St. Patty's Day. You might have pink for a girls' night. You might have, you know, green and red for Christmas. And you know, we talked about Elves' Night Out and things like that. Being able to use this concept of color and a colorful community to build out an event series. So just take that. This is in no way saying that Girls' Night Out is bad or anything like that. It's just, I saw it as an opportunity for you guys. Right. It could be more impactful. It could be more than just getting the women of the community out. Okay, so then next, Funky Fish. And again, here you can see where we tap into that handwritten typeface, and we use our color to really drive that overall. This next one, Ray, you ready? You ready? I mean, come on.
Did you see our I assume you're on our website. Did you
I
see
did.
our paddle battle one for last year?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
I
also,
like that one. I dig this though.
well, and what this is, and again, I think one of the things that you as an organization have to combat is you have volunteers that are putting on the events. When you have volunteers that are putting on the events, the volunteers' top of mind awareness is not brand consistency. So if they volunteered for something last year, they want it to look different this year because it's fresh to them. Where to the person who has come out, having that consistency and then also the correlation to the brand recognition is important. So the brand battle I think is really cool. This next one was something that we talked about. You ready? So having downtown putt-putt, but instead of using a putter, you use a paddle. And it becomes, yeah, it's just crazy. It's just fun stuff. You know, it's just fun stuff.
Well, we've had two substantial golf courses in our community. One is literally right behind us. And how many are in Gaylord that
We have 3 substantial in this town.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Like
How many
one
are
of them,
three?
is like in the top, the nation. It's nationally rated.
Which one is that? What's that?
Um,
Golf course?
Uh,
Yeah, the one down south. Not Fox Run,
not Fox
but,
Run.
I only know about Grayling and Fox Run.
Forest Gym.
There you go.
Oh, Forest Gym. I have heard that.
It is.
So, yeah, this is, I dig that.
Well, so what you start to see with all this is you start to see
I love that.
there's a connection, but you're also still giving the latitude to be able to have make your own design decisions, be able to have and kind of capture slightly different personalities here. You'll see, obviously, one of the things that I tried to illustrate was when you're doing an extension like this, you don't always have to force the word type into every single logo because that can be very dictatorial. So what I did was I simply created that scroll using the same typeface and then creating a couple different variants of the scroll so that you can incorporate that if it feels right. And then there are other times where it's fine just to leave it out altogether. But I think that what you do when you have an event series like this is every event you do is now depositing back into downtown as a whole. So I'm pretty excited about how that goes. Now, I will say, as I went through my list, there were a couple things on my list that I didn't get to. We talked a lot about wayfinding signage. I would like to be able to show you how brand integration would work on that. And that can be a little bit confusing because you have Grayling, the city, you have Grayling, the township, you have downtown as a district. So I want to make sure that I can give you very clear recommendations.
And for instance, too, you know, GPA, which we spoke about, is waiting for this branding to create banners for the 75 loop.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, you know, if we obviously aren't going to incorporate specific events like that, but
Right.
we could take not the downtown, but the
community.
one and use that or something
Absolutely.
like it.
And I had an absolutely delightful time with GPA yesterday. They were not anywhere near as militant as everyone. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it was great, and I am more than happy to design those banners and send them
Okay,
your way.
because I've been talking to people about the cost of those banners, and it is significant, so we want to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're going to put up, hopefully, metal banners that have at least a 5 to 10 year warranty. So
Okay.
this logo needs to be something that will appeal for a long time.
And it needs to be something. Are you doing laser cut?
No, they're actually, the ones that I've found are made of an aluminum sandwich with a vinyl in between, and then there's a vinyl overlay, which can be changed if necessary, say 5 years from now, if it doesn't fit anymore, or if there's been some sort of damage to it, whatever. You can send it to a sign maker, okay, and take that off and put a new one on. In effect, it's kind of like the Main Street ones that we have down there. Effectively, it's a sticker, but it's a really,
Interesting.
big sticker kind of a thing.
And is that needed because of the wind velocity here?
Yeah, we had some fabric ones. They lasted 2 years, and after that, they were just useless, and they were not cheap, even the
Right.
vinyl ones.
No, they're not cheap.
Because we
They're
had
not
to
cheap.
also buy brackets to
Right.
fit them.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
so we want something that lasts longer.
Yeah,
We
I
can
can.
change them. It's a fairly easy fix and relatively inexpensive to change the look. We'll still have the basic metal
Gotcha.
sign piece.
Gotcha. And you know, one of the things I will say about banners is typically folks over design them. Because what they do is when they sit down to design the banners, they start with a white screen instead of a photo of where the banner's going to go. So they end up putting too much activity, too much clutter, and what I like banners to do in a community is I like them to provide a certain rhythm. I like to be able to look down the street and see a continuous
Well, but here's another issue. If you look at what this business loop looks like when you come off of 75, it's extremely busy already
It
down
is.
that middle section. And the banners that we had just got
Lost,
in the
yeah.
confusion.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to happen again.
Absolutely.
So we need something that will cut through that confusion.
I think we can help with that, no problem, no problem.
Would you have that in vector art?
It will be vector.
Yeah.
It will. Sure will. So that's a great question about vector. So everything, all the logos that we've designed are all based in vector art. Vector, for those of you that don't know it, it essentially just means that it's been created by a program that uses mathematical calculations to program the art instead of bitmap art. And bitmap art is, if you just picture a grid and each square has a color associated to the grid, that's what bitmap art is. So vector art never pixelates.
Right.
You can blow it up to the size of a water tower and the quality doesn't degrade.
That's
It's
why
like
we needed
digital.
that.
Yes, yeah. So what we'll do is, with every logo, we save it in 5 different file formats. So you'll have 3 vectors and 2 bitmap or rasters. And then that way, in addition to that, there'll be a style guide. The style guide will define your typefaces, it'll define your colors, it'll show you how to use it, how not to use
So
it.
we could give that to the manufacturer.
You would,
just
what
that
you would
way,
do
and
is
it'll
you
come
would
back to us.
literally share the link that we give to Ray, and you just share it directly with the vendor. And the
Yay.
vendor will be able to access the style guide, the vendor will be able to access the typefaces and all that kind of stuff. We make it as easy as possible to distribute all that stuff. So that's what I was able to do since yesterday. What did y'all do? No.
Did you sleep last night?
I slept a little bit. Yeah, I slept a little bit. I went to sleep.
Cried between watching Criminal Minds and the news.
I decided, the way that my night went, I started off, I just turned the TV on in the hotel room for distraction, and it was on some sort of true crime channel. So I apparently watched through their entire cycle of shows, and once it started to repeat the show I already watched 4 hours ago. Right. I had to change, and I decided to put on my Netflix and start watching Walking Dead. And then I realized that a zombie apocalypse was far less scary based off of the results that were coming in on my Google search. So I found that I was no longer satisfied with Walking Dead, so I just shut that down. And,
It wasn't bad.
Right. I'm sitting there looking at some of those zombies, and it's like they're not really that scary anymore. So,
I could probably take that. You can laugh.
well, now it's your turn. You've listened to me for 45 minutes. What are your thoughts? Do you feel like the direction that I'm walking down makes sense? Do you like the way the things are connected and the overall approach to things?
I do.
Okay.
I like the color selections.
Good.
too,
Good.
Because it gives us a lot of options. too,
Good.
So that every event and every sign doesn't have to be the same, but they're connected.
Right.
And I like that colorful, that colorful town thing.
Yeah.
I think that's
Cool.
pretty interesting.
Cool.
I don't quite understand paddle putt-putt yet, but.
You will.
You will.
You will, Mr. Keyword.
You will.
It's coming.
It's a new event.
It's funny how my first thought when I saw the Grayling Main Street with the array of paddles there, was the NBC, the color.
Peacock,
The
yeah.
peacock,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then, once we get all this stuff in there, it's just, well, of course it is, it's perfect.
Well, and what you just described is exactly, there's a reason why most Main Street organizations across the country, when they decide to design a logo for themselves, why they end up with a picture of a streetscape. Because in their mind, they're walking down this quest for uniqueness, and they land on the buildings of their downtown, but it doesn't end up working that way. When you use an icon like this, an icon so simple, when you first introduce it, your mind's job is to try to associate it. So when you look at that and you see NBC Peacock, to me, that's not a bad thing. What that says is we've landed in this icon association realm that we want. That is exactly why when we go through this process, we do the build out. It's why we show you all the materials at the same time. Because if all we had done was stick up the Main Street logo and said, okay, group, let's talk about this, you wouldn't have seen it work. You wouldn't have seen how it starts to fit. And now because of its simplicity, it makes it so easy for you to drop that sucker down in the bottom corner of every poster that you do and start to get that recognition.
I think the only thing that I'm missing here, and maybe I just don't, I'm not looking at it properly, but I don't see the artisan part of Grayling on any of these logos.
I think that the aspect of green and the color one, I think is naturally appropriate, but I think it also attaches that we're not vanilla. We're not plain and
Well, I
simple.
understand that, but I
We've got a
still
variety.
don't see the artisan in it. I still see a lot of outdoors, which is, you know, certainly appropriate, but I'm not seeing that cool, you know, factor that we talked
See, I
about.
think that comes through in the fact that there is consistent and stylized design.
Okay.
And again, I think that what we've looked at is we've looked at community identity, we've looked at the event identity. There's yet another step to walk down, and it is the way in which you market those. Now, the problem is when you get into how do you represent artisan?
Right, and that's,
Well,
that's
Right, the thing that you do not put on your logo is a paintbrush and a palette. You know what I mean? Like, everybody knows that's not what you want on there, but a lot of the design inspiration to me, I think, like when you sit there and you look at that Paddle Battle logo, that is the kind of thing where you could take that logo and you could literally burn that logo into a piece of wood. And if you took that logo and you burned it into a piece of wood, like into the end of a paddle, and put it onto a poster, then now all of a sudden the simple way that you've implemented the art connects in with this whole idea of the artisanry. So I think that there's absolutely room for us to make sure that we hit on that, but also I'm not the least bit concerned that we can do it in the implementation of our marketing.
Well, you know, I'm not suggesting that, you know, this is not perfect the way it is.
No, I get you.
It's just that I wasn't seeing.
We got to fill that
not
out.
seeing that
Absolutely.
connection.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because I like all of this very much.
Good. Good.
I'm impressed with how much you got done in a very short time.
Well, thank you. And I will say that part of the reason that we do the process the way we do is I feel like it is the process's job to stress my recommendations. I was able to create everything you see here since yesterday afternoon. That being said, that means that this system is usable. If I was able to create all this in 14 or 16 hours, then obviously you're not expected to do the same amount in the same speed, but it shows you that with the typeface selection, with the color palette selection, with the general approach to graphics, it has created a platform and a foundation for brand extension. Exactly. And that is why we put that kind of pressure on ourselves.
Do you have all of this in some format that you can distribute to us so that we can show those pictures to others?
Absolutely. In fact, I will tell you what I would recommend. I have been recording the presentation, and I'm going to post that to YouTube and share the link with Ray. I will also save a PDF and where you can share and distribute a PDF, but I want to be very, very mindful. I want to share with you all, and this is an important thing to hear when you are in a small community. We're going through a process that is driven by strategy. Everyone's opinion is not equal. A person who listens to the strategy and listens to the video and then provides feedback, that feedback carries a different weight to it than a person who simply looks at a static logo and says, I don't know if I like it, even though they have no clue, because everything that we've showed here, we have to earn the meaning behind it through implementation. So yes, absolutely, I can share with you all both of those resources, and all I say with that is be mindful. I would say as much as you can, push people to the presentation.
Well, I'm concerned only to show it.
To your husband.
Yeah, because he's the board member, not
Right,
me.
right.
And also that we have to submit some information to GPA about our banners in the next very few days. And I want something to show them to say, we're looking at this sort of thing.
Absolutely.
That's all I care about.
Yeah. And what I'll actually do with you all is, if it's okay, I'll coordinate through Ray, and I would like to send proposed designs for the banner
I
specifically.
would like that.
So if
That'd be-
you can,
yeah.
if you can give Ray the size dimensions,
2 by 3.
okay, you're doing 2 by
I
3s.
think that's what we're doing.
Okay.
That seems to be pretty standard.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But I just want some pictures to show the group now, rather than waiting a few days or a week before you get to that suggestion. for
Okay.
our banners.
All right.
That's all. So a PDF of these with color would be just great for me.
Yep. Easy enough.
That's all I want to do.
So we are going to do a secondary visit and a larger reveal, is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so keep these things, a little
Oh, yeah.
close-ish to your
Yeah.
chest.
Absolutely.
Clearly we want to create buzz about it and let people know that this is a thing that's in progress and that it's coming soon and that we're going to be looking for some more, we have to do a couple more larger community.
Yeah, I
engagements.
mean, I think one of the things that we'll have to do, and this is where it's kind of funny, we're gonna need to meet with the city and then sit down again with Visitors Bureau. And since we made a lot of those connections this time, I think it's going to be fine and easy. But what I would really like to make sure that Visit 2 consists of is creating usable products. So from a Main Street perspective, if you feel good about the direction I'm walking down, I would say what I'd love to get from you is, okay, what's the next list of things? Do you want me to help design a paddle battle poster for the next paddle battle? Things like that. If we can do some more stuff for you all, and then at the same time, if we can push for adoption on a city level and a Visitors Bureau level, I think we're cooking with gas. We got a pretty good platform.
I think the city is already well on their way to being on board with this. I
Cool.
don't anticipate a challenge there at all.
Good.
And speaking with Eileen yesterday, she seems pretty open to the concept.
Absolutely.
I like the stylized G. My favorite one, to be honest with you, my favorite one is the downtown one.
Yeah.
With the paddle.
I'm glad that's your favorite
That is, yeah.
because it's for you.
I appreciate
But
I appreciate this Main Street one because it's very clean, professional look.
well,
But when it comes to incorporating all of the DDA, all of downtown.
absolutely.
It's absolutely my favorite.
well, and again, this is where the whole strategy fits in together. As I sat down and started cranking on things, I didn't feel like I could present the downtown concept with the confidence I wanted to until you knew how I wanted to talk about the community as a whole. Because I don't think that you could push through the downtown logo without that more kind of top tier existing as well. I think it's important for people to see how it nails down through, but I could just see, I mean, there's some really cool things that you could do with this concept. And I mean, you could really make this stuff cook. And I want you all to know, from an organizational perspective, I have done this a lot in a lot of places. I am thrilled with I'm thrilled with the energy and the direction that you all are taking. You're doing cool stuff, and it's good stuff, and you're evaluating what you do, and you're determining, you're having hard conversations that a lot of organizations like yours wouldn't have. And you just need to keep doing that, keep walking down that road, because it's that constant evaluation is what makes something.
So at what point will you be back in Grayling?
We have not scheduled a return visit yet. It's either going to be mid-December or early January, but the holidays it's just hard to work
Well,
around.
I don't know about the folks sitting here, but some of the involved in that leave for the winter.
The whole new year, new logo, new everything, like
Yeah.
vibe though.
And
Well, and again, here's the
But it's
thing.
gonna stretch into something else, so.
It's gonna
It's-
depend on your schedule.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I mean, I'm pretty solid. But, so carving out time is gonna be an interesting proposition. We gotta make sure that we get the things where we want them to be, but also understand that, the process of rolling this out is, you're actually gonna wanna go through a very strategic process. And that's one of the things Kirsten's gonna help you with, is this idea of, it's one thing to adopt it and say, these tools are the tools we wanna go with, let's start using them. It's a whole different thing to look at what a launch looks like. And actually, I'm a big believer in, if you're gonna adopt it now, you launch it leading into next summer. Because that gives you enough time to actually be using it. And people are funny, like, you sit there and you roll out a new logo and they don't know. They don't even realize it. But then what you do is you have this event leading into your heavy season, or you actually do it as part of the 70th marathon. You know, like, find a way when a lot of people are already going to be gathered, and then celebrate. But you will have already done all this legwork leading up to it. So not only are you saying it, but you're immediately having things they can see that are reinforcing it. So we'll work that through. I will also say this, due to the nature of my involvement with the Project Rising Tide, I don't want you all to be overly concerned about when the next return visit is. The return visit is far more about making sure all the tools are in play, making sure that the resources are passed over, and the groups that need to have the tools have the tools. I feel confident with the number of trips that I have planned with that project, that if I need to come again, I can come again. I mean, that's, you guys have proven that you're willing to do the cool stuff. If it means I need to swing out here because we're going to do something fun, let's do it. I mean, it's pretty easy for me to get here from Delaware. Quick hop, quick drive.
Through Atlanta into Minnesota.
Who do I remind you of? Garth Brooks.
You talk like he has, you say the
He's been a little more successful than I have.
things. He can stand.
Y'all went to a Garth Brooks concert recently, didn't you? Joe indoctrinated you to the Garth. Was that your first, or had you already been?
I had not been.
Okay. Yeah.
My first concert was
Did you?
when they were for like 2 different weeks.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the last shows too, because they were selling them so
Did he still, was he still wearing the like solid color button shirts like he did in 1994? That's awesome. Wow, wow. All-nighter. All-nighter. Well, anything else I need to hear? Any other things? Any glaring omissions? Things that you were hoping for that maybe we talked about and I forgot? Or there are a couple things. I've got to go and consolidate all my different lists. I was working off of the main list that I made during our board meeting. But there were a couple things that, like for example, I had talked about Grayling and Bloom, and I know that's kind of a community-wide, even though design is integral in that. There's some other things that I'd love just to kind of throw out there, food for thought, that aren't main streets but are community-wide. I think we could possibly even show where GPA, GPA's got their logo, and their logo is the stylized G, P, and A with the fish for the G, yeah. But again, like it's also the typeface selection there is sporadic based off of what they're doing. So we could show that. I Festival of Trees. I went over and checked out some of the trees yesterday. There's a tree that has cereal all over it, which is pretty awesome.
Then there's a tree that looks like a dress.
There's a tree that looks like the abominable snowman from Yukon. What is that? Is that red? Is that Rudolph? Is it? The whole tree is a big white tree.
You know, decorate historical societies
You
tomorrow,
better go.
so.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning.
Some of them are awesome.
Yeah.
Every year, we had 55 trees in. There's 55 trees this year.
Well, it was so funny. We left the GPA meeting yesterday, and Mary was at the GPA meeting, and then she went over there, and I came in right
It's
after.
Mary.
Mary
Thornsberry.
is it from Design Committee.
Yes.
Yeah, and even though Mary and I had just spoken at GPA, and she had given me the lyrics to Miss Betty's song about Grayling,
Yes.
for some reason, it was one of those scenarios where when you see somebody in a different context, you're not sure who they are. No, I knew who she was. She thought that I was one of the guys decorating the cereal tree.
Oh.
And she was like, "Are you going to come back on Friday?" And I was like, "Well, no, ma'am, I'm leaving tomorrow." And she said, "Well, you don't have to work?" And I was like, "Well, no, I am working. I'm gotta go home." And she said, "Well, where do you live?" And I'm like, "Mary, we just talked." And she looked at me and she, so, yeah. Well, I tell you what, just talk next steps real quick again. Today, I'm going to export this out as a video and get it loaded on YouTube. I'm going to save it as a PDF. I'm going to get that information to Ray. She can distribute it. And then I will wait to hear back from you all. If you feel pretty confident, I mean, my rule of thumb is the quicker you get to a point where you're like, you know what, let's go with it, start prepping it. I would love to be able to hear back from you at the beginning of Thanksgiving week. If things are looking and sounding good, I'd love to use that week to prep things.
Is that a board, that's a board approval thing, is it not? And you have, and there's a meeting
Yeah,
next
coming
week,
up,
so.
that's next week, the 17th.
Yeah,
The thing about this, and I just, from a process standpoint, you guys, in my mind, you guys are the owners of the Main Street brand and the downtown brand. So the only thing that you all technically would need to adopt in from a technical standpoint would be the Main Street brand. The downtown brand technically is, I mean, if the board just kind of graces it and says, yes, we're comfortable with this, we want to use it. But what I'll do is if we can get to a point where y'all are comfortable with that, I can prep a full package of your events, your organization logos, your downtown stuff, and I can go ahead and get it in your hands. And then that way you can start integrating it as you see fit, and even leading in to, you know, the further strategy development that comes out of it. I wish that I had a card.
don't you sign one for yourself?
I have a card. I don't currently possess them because I ran out last week and forgot to refill over the weekend. Do you want?
Phone number?
I do. Actually, can I give you my email because that's better?
Sure.
It's Ben at Arnett, ARNETT, then MULDROW.com. W. Muldrow.com. That's me. That'll get to me. Well, y'all, thank you so much. It's been a great week.
Great job.
I'm excited. Are you excited, Ray?
I'm very excited.
Okay.
I'm genuinely confused about why we have not thought to use paddles for a frickin' snowflake. Like, this is really bothersome to me that we
Yes. In the future.
I actually very much like all
Did
that.
or didn't do it.
Good.
Doesn't matter.
And
Good.
like, I appreciate the new, the Main Street logo, I like it, it's very clean, it's very professional.
I like too, it's like looking forward, like everybody, you think of a sunrise and think of like progress and like it's a new day and like everything's moving in the same direction. I like that.
Well,
And
I
it's
like the-
organizational. I think that's the thing. It's like if, as you design a Main Street logo, if you're trying to make that Main Street logo represent the downtown as a destination, you can see where that very easily gets over designed.
Well, and I like the one that we got from Michigan Main Street, I like it and I think it's nice, but I have always thought that it was very busy. And we've done a really great job of utilizing it and translating it into our times. Kate does a great job of incorporating it and making it part of the event logo, which I think have always turned out really nice.
Mhm.
But when I see a cleaner, simpler presentation like this is more appealing to me as an organizational logo, as an organizational brand. It's easier for me to recognize that and to go on and to not get caught up in worrying about how I'm going to incorporate
Yeah.
events into that.
Well, and
but to
I-
be able for the events to still connect to it and have a clear connection.
I will say, from having worked in state programs all over the country, I actually really like how Michigan handles this with newer programs, where essentially they allow them to lean on that statewide logo. And then what you're doing is, while you are getting your foundation set, your identity is tied to that state level identity because they're the same logo. And then from there, I mean, that is why they fund branding tech visits. Their intent is that you will outgrow it.
For us to get over.
Right,
And
right.
I also don't think that it's super representative of our downtown. Like, it's big, tall buildings.
It's urban, yeah.
That's not us. It's
Right.
really not appropriate for us. It's been useful
Mhm.
and it has been recognizable, but it's really not indicative of what we are as a community and as a Main Street.
Cool.
So to have something that I think is more representative of our Main Street and more representative of our community is going to be really helpful going forward.
Good. Well, y'all, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Great job.
Yeah.